What if I told you that the scariest sound in a family isn't shouting, it's silence? A silence so heavy it controls every move, every word, every breath, until one child dares to break it. The story begins the way so many stories of family do, not with shouting, not with laughter, not even with a dramatic event, but with silence. A silence that sits in the room like an extra presence, heavy, unavoidable, shaping everything, even when no one acknowledges it. Imagine walking into a house where you can hear the ticking of the clock louder than any voices, where footsteps are careful, where glances carry more meaning than spoken sentences. That is the world this family lives in. A world where words are rare, but silence is constant. The father is the quiet center of the house. He sits in his chair, reading, working, existing like a stone placed in the middle of a flowing river. He doesn't need to speak because his silence itself demands attention. When he does speak, his words are short, sharp, and final. They cut the air like blades, leaving no space for argument. The mother is the opposite in sound, but not in spirit. She is movement and sound, her voice filling the air as she cooks, cleans, organizes. But even her words are not truly free. They circle within the boundaries of rules and routines. Her laughter, when it comes, is fleeting, like sunlight breaking briefly through clouds. Her anger is sharp, her exhaustion deeper than she lets anyone see. And then there are the children, the eldest, always responsible, always stepping in to hold the fragile peace. The youngest, innocent, playing in the corners, pretending not to notice the weight in the air. And the middle one, the one who feels the silence most keenly, the one who cannot stop asking questions in a place where questions are dangerous. It is this child's voice that will turn everything, because in a house built on silence, even a whisper of rebellion sounds like thunder. Every family has unspoken rules, and in this house those rules are iron. Do not question the father. Do not linger on the past. Do not leave the table before every plate is clean. Do not ask why the mother sometimes stares out the window too long. These rules are never written down, never explained, but they are enforced in glances, in sighs, in the sudden sharpness of a single word. The children learn them not because anyone teaches them, but because they feel the cost of breaking them. And so, day after day, year after year, the family performs the rituals of silence. But silence, like water, can wear away even the strongest stone, and it begins with the smallest question. One Sunday morning, the middle child asks something simple. Why do we always eat the same thing every week? The words seem harmless, curious, ordinary, but in this house they land like a spark on dry ground. The mother freezes mid-step, the spoon in her hand hovering above the pot. The father lowers his paper slightly, his eyes narrowing. The air thickens. After a long pause, the mother answers sharply, because that's how it is, that's how it has always been. And with that, the conversation ends. Outwardly, life resumes. But inside the child a seed has been planted. That seed is doubt, the beginning of defiance. Once you start wondering why rules exist, you cannot stop. Why must meals never change? Why must silence be respected more than truth? Why must tradition matter more than happiness? These questions echo in the child's heart long after the words have faded, and though no one else notices, something fundamental has shifted. At the family table, the tension simmers beneath the surface. Every glance, every word unspoken, carries weight. The father dominates with his silence, the mother with her order, the eldest with their duty. But the middle child feels the silence like chains. Sitting there, spoon in hand, they begin to imagine another way of living, a world where questions are allowed, where voices are free. And once the imagination begins, there is no way to turn it off. That night, as the house settles into its routine, the child lies awake. The ceiling above them feels lower, the walls closer. They replay the moment, again and again. The way the room froze, the way their mother's voice cracked sharp like glass. They do not regret asking. Instead, they feel something new, a flicker of courage. Small, fragile, but real. This is how change begins in families, not with shouting matches or sudden revolutions, but with a simple question that refuses to die. The next morning, life resumes, but for the child, everything looks different. The father's silence is no longer unshakable, it is heavy but brittle. The mother's laughter is no longer bright, it is fragile. The rules no longer feel natural, they feel like cages. And the child knows, deep in their heart, that they will ask again, that they will not remain silent forever. And though no one else realizes it yet, this is the start of everything. The silence of the house has been cracked, and once a crack appears, it will only widen. The family may not see it, the parents may try to deny it, the siblings may try to ignore it, but the child knows. The door is slightly open. Change is coming. The days after that Sunday pass with the rhythm of routine, but to the middle child, nothing feels the same. They wake in the morning, hear the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the shuffle of their father's newspaper, the hum of their mother's voice, but each sound carries new meaning now. It is as if a veil has been lifted, as if the house they thought they knew so well suddenly reveals cracks in its walls. The silence has been disturbed, and though everyone else pretends nothing has happened, the child feels it with every breath. At school, their curiosity grows bolder. When a teacher asks a question, the child's hand goes up before they even think. Friends notice, some teasing them, some admiring them. For the first time, the child realizes that their voice matters, that it can change the way people look at them. They feel alive in that space, free in ways they never feel at home. And yet, each step back toward the house feels like walking into a cage, where silence waits like a guard at the door. One evening, the child sits in the kitchen while their mother folds laundry. The fabric rustles softly, the lamp casts a warm yellow light. Gathering courage, the child asks, "Mom, do you ever want things to be different?" The mother stills, her hands frozen on a shirt. For a moment, she does not breathe. Then she answers without looking up, "Different can be dangerous. We have enough. That's what matters." She forces a smile, pats the child's hand, and changes the subject. But the child has seen the truth in her eyes, a flicker of longing, a shadow of regret. The mother once wanted more. She just buried it beneath years of duty. The father, sensing the questions growing, grows sharper in his silence. He does not scold, not yet. Instead, he watches. His eyes linger on the child longer than before, his newspaper lowered just slightly, his silence heavier. He believes discipline will protect his authority, that the rules of the house will remain intact if no one dares to challenge them. But the child has already begun to change. They feel the weight of his gaze, and though fear twists in their stomach, they do not look away. That, in itself, is rebellion. The eldest sibling notices too. One night they whisper urgently, "Stop asking questions. Please, you're making everything worse." The middle child answers, steady but soft, "I can't. If I stop, nothing will ever change." The eldest shakes their head, torn between fear and truth. They crave peace, but deep down, they know peace built on silence is fragile, false. Their silence is not agreement, it is survival. The youngest, meanwhile, begins to imitate the middle child in small ways. When told to be quiet, they giggle louder. When told to clean up, they pause, testing boundaries. The parents scold, blaming the middle child's influence, but even their anger cannot stop it. Change spreads quietly, like fire catching in dry grass. Then comes a night that seals the shift. The father returns home earlier than usual, his face lined with fatigue. He sits at the table, staring out the window, his tea untouched. The children sense something unusual. The youngest hides behind toys, the eldest retreats upstairs, But the middle child lingers. Hesitantly they ask, "Are you okay?" The father looks up, startled. For a moment, he almost answers. His lips part, his eyes soften, but then the wall slams back into place. "Go do your homework," he mutters. Still, the child has seen something, a flicker of fragility, proof that the father is not as unbreakable as his silence pretends. That night, lying in bed, the child thinks of that flicker again and again. They realize their father's silence is not power, but fear, not strength, but survival. And if even he is trapped by silence, then silence itself is the enemy. This revelation hardens their resolve. They will not let silence decide who they are. At the next Sunday meal, the ritual unfolds as always: soup, bread, silence. But this time, when the father speaks of duty, repeating words they have heard 1,000 times, the middle child interrupts softly but firmly. Maybe duty isn't everything. Maybe happiness matters too. The table freezes. The mother's spoon clatters. The eldest gasps. The youngest leans forward with wide eyes. The father glares, his silence burning. "You don't know what you're talking about," he says. The child holds his gaze. For the first time, they do not look away. The words hang heavy, impossible to erase. The meal continues, but nothing is the same. Everyone feels it. The silence has cracked wider. The door has opened further. The father's power is shaken, the mother's sorrow exposed, the siblings unsettled, and the child, though their heart pounds with fear, feels a fierce calm. They spoke, they did not retreat, and the world did not end. That night, they write in their hidden notebook. They write about the table, about happiness, about how silence can suffocate. They write about their father's eyes, about their mother's trembling hands, about their own beating heart. Each word is a rebellion, each page a declaration. They are no longer just a child in a silent house. They are a voice, and their voice will not disappear. The house is still heavy, silence still lingers, fear still hovers. But something has shifted forever, and the child knows it. They are no longer asking if change is possible, they are asking when. The days after that second Sunday meal carry an energy that no one can name, but everyone can feel. The father sits as he always does, silent, stern, pretending the world has not changed. The mother keeps the rhythm of chores and meals, humming just enough to make it seem like all is normal. The eldest shoulders more than their share of responsibility, keeping their head down, trying desperately to patch the cracks. The youngest grows bolder, mimicking the middle child's defiance in ways that seem innocent but carry meaning. And the middle child, at the center of it all, feels both the weight of fear and the strange thrill of courage. Because once you have spoken against silence, you cannot go back. You carry the knowledge with you, a flame that flickers no matter how tightly others try to snuff it out. At school, their confidence grows even more obvious. They raise their hand before anyone else, they argue points with teachers, they defend classmates who falter. Some students admire them, others roll their eyes, but all recognize that something burns in them that cannot be ignored. It is not about being the smartest or the strongest, it is about refusing to vanish into the background. Each time they speak, they prove to themselves that their voice matters, that it can carve out space in a world that often prefers silence. And each time they return home, the contrast becomes sharper. In one world they are heard, in the other they are a threat. One rainy afternoon, the child enters the kitchen, where the mother sits quietly, staring out the window. The usual clatter of dishes is absent, the hum of her voice gone. She looks far away, lost in a place no one else can see. The child hesitates, then asks, "What did you want before this life?" The mother startles, her hands tightening on the cloth in her lap. For a long moment, she says nothing. Then softly, almost in a whisper, she answers, "I wanted to sing." The words slip out before she can stop them, and once they are spoken, her face crumples. She shakes her head quickly, adding, "But that was long ago. Dreams don't put food on the table." She stands abruptly, returning to her chores, shutting the door on the moment. But the child has heard it. Their mother once had a voice too, a voice buried beneath years of duty. And now, even if she denies it, the truth lives in the child's heart like a torch passed quietly in the dark. The father notices changes he cannot control. He sees the spark in the middle child's eyes, the way their voice no longer trembles when they speak. He tries to counter it with silence sharpened into a weapon, with stricter rules, with sharper commands. But the more he grips, the more the child resists. At dinner, when he demands absolute quiet, the youngest giggles. When he orders chores done without complaint, the middle child answers firmly, "I will do it, but I will not be silent." These are small acts, but they build. They pile one on top of another, until even the eldest cannot deny the shift. The eldest, torn between loyalty and longing, breaks one night. They whisper urgently to the middle child, "You don't understand. If you keep pushing, he'll break. And if he breaks, we all pay the price." But the middle child replies with steady eyes, "He already broke long ago. We're just the ones finally seeing it." The words sting because they ring true. The eldest turns away, unable to argue, unable to agree. They carry the weight in silence, their bodies showing what their voice cannot. Then comes a night when everything feels different. The father comes home earlier than usual, his face tired, his eyes dull. He sits in his chair, staring at nothing, while the mother sets dinner without a word. The children sense it immediately. The eldest hovers, trying to manage. The youngest plays with their food nervously. The middle child watches closely, waiting. After long minutes of silence, the father sighs, a sound so rare it startles them all. The child seizes the moment, asking gently, "Do you ever wish things were easier?" The father looks up sharply, his eyes blazing. "Life is not about easy," he snaps. But beneath the anger is something else, something fragile. The child sees it, and for the first time they feel not only fear of him but also pity. He is not only their oppressor, he is also a prisoner of the same silence, bound by the same chains he uses on them. That realization becomes a turning point. The child no longer sees rebellion only as selfishness, but as survival, not just for themselves, but for everyone. If they can break silence, maybe they can break it for their mother too, for the eldest, even for the youngest, and maybe, deep down, even for the father. Because silence has cost them all too much already. The next Sunday, the ritual unfolds as always. Soup, bread, rules. But this time, when the father repeats his mantra of duty, the middle child speaks firmly. "We have duty, yes. But don't we deserve happiness too?" The father slams his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. The mother gasps, the eldest freezes, the youngest stares wide-eyed. But the child does not back down. Their voice shakes, but they hold his gaze. If we only live for duty, then what is the point of living at all? The silence that follows is unbearable. The father's face hardens, his silence louder than any shout. But something is different now. He has heard words he cannot unhear. The mother looks at her child with tearful eyes. The eldest hides their face. The youngest grins nervously. The meal continues, but everyone knows nothing will ever be the same. That night, the child writes again in their notebook. They write about duty and happiness, about silence and voice. They write about their father's anger, about their mother's sorrow, about their siblings' confusion. And they write about themselves not as a victim, not as a rebel, but as someone who refuses to disappear. Their words spill onto the page, building a world where voices matter, where laughter is not forbidden, where silence is a choice, not a law. Lying awake, they whisper to themselves, "I will not be silent, not anymore." The words echo in the quiet, a promise carved into the night. And though the house is still heavy, though storms still loom, something unshakable has begun. The silence may roar, but it will never rule again. The days stretch into weeks, but the crack in the family's silence has widened. It is no longer the small fissure of a single question, but the growing fracture of a truth that refuses to be buried again. Outwardly, routines remain unchanged. The father sits with his paper, the mother cooks and cleans, the eldest shoulders responsibilities, the youngest plays, and the middle child continues their quiet rebellion. Yet beneath the surface, every action feels charged, every glance heavy. The father's silence no longer feels like power, it feels like a shield, dented and straining. The mother's movements no longer feel like simple duty, they feel like a rhythm meant to distract from something deeper. The eldest grows more weary, their eyes showing exhaustion they never voice. The youngest, emboldened by imitation, begins to push boundaries more openly. And the middle child feels stronger, though fear still gnaws at them in quiet moments. At school, their voice grows louder still. They ask questions no one else dares. They challenge teachers with polite but firm curiosity. They defend classmates who stumble. Some call them brave, some call them reckless, but none ignore them. It is at school that they taste the freedom their home denies, and with each taste, the hunger grows. They begin to imagine futures beyond the house, futures where their voice is not punished, but celebrated. And each time they return home, the contrast sharpens. It is like stepping from bright sunlight into a dim, airless room. And once you have lived in the light, darkness is harder to endure. The eldest watches all of this with a mixture of fear and envy. They see their sibling daring what they never dared, speaking what they never spoke. And though they scold, though they beg for caution, part of them longs to be as bold. But they are too entrenched in duty, too bound by the role they have taken on. Their silence is not loyalty, but survival. And survival is heavy. The mother begins to shift in small, almost imperceptible ways. She stops scolding so quickly when questions arise. She lets the youngest giggle longer, lets the eldest rest a little sooner, lets the middle child's words hang in the air without instantly cutting them down. Once, late at night, while folding clothes, she whispers, "Don't give up your voice. I lost mine long ago." The middle child does not answer, but those words lodge in their heart, strengthening their resolve. The mother may not be able to rebel, but she quietly blesses those who do. The father, however, feels the change most sharply. His silence, once absolute, is no longer unchallenged. His rules, once followed without question, now meet resistance. His authority, once solid, now cracks. He tries to restore order through stricter commands, through harsher silences, through sharp reminders of duty. But none of it holds as it once did. The middle child no longer trembles. The youngest no longer obeys without hesitation. The mother no longer enforces his rules as fiercely. Even the eldest falters in their role as peacemaker. He feels control slipping, and the more he senses it, the tighter he grips. But the tighter he grips, the more the family pulls away. One evening the storm breaks again. At the table, the father scolds the youngest for laughing too loudly. The middle child speaks up, calm but steady. "They're just laughing. It's not wrong to laugh." The father's face darkens, his silence sharp as a blade. He slams his hand on the table, the sound reverberating. But this time, instead of fear, the middle child meets his eyes and does not look away. The eldest stares in shock, the mother freezes, the youngest grows wide-eyed. For a long moment, the air feels like it might shatter. Then, slowly, the father withdraws his hand, returns to his food, and says nothing more. The silence that follows is not victory, but it is not defeat either. It is proof that power can shift, even if only slightly. That night, the child writes in their notebook again. They write about laughter, about silence, about how fragile control can be. They write about the way their father's hand trembled when he slammed it down, about the way his silence no longer felt impenetrable. They write about their mother's eyes, full of both fear and hope, and about their siblings, each caught in the storm. And as they write, they realize something profound. Their rebellion is no longer just for themselves, it is for all of them. For the mother who buried her voice, for the eldest who carries too much, for the youngest who deserves freedom, and maybe even for the father who never learned another way. The youngest continues to mirror the change. They start asking questions openly, testing rules, laughing without restraint. The parents scold, but less fiercely than before. The eldest tries to rein them in, but their words lack conviction. And the mother, though still cautious, lets them be. The family is changing, piece by piece, like a house slowly shifting on its foundation. Then comes another Sunday, the day that always carries the heaviest weight. The table is set, the soup is served, the bread sliced. The father begins his usual talk of duty, of sacrifice, of silence. But this time, the middle child interrupts not with a question, but with a story. They speak of something at school, a moment of laughter, of teamwork, of being heard. Their voice is steady, their story bright. The father glares, but the child continues. The mother listens, her lips pressed tight, but her eyes shining. The eldest hides a smile behind their hand. The youngest giggles. For once, the silence cannot swallow the sound. The father says nothing, but his silence is no longer control. It is retreat. And though the battle is far from over, the middle child feels a surge of victory. They have spoken their truth, and the world did not collapse. The family still sits at the table, the meal still continues, the house still stands, and that knowledge gives them strength. That night, lying in bed, the child whispers to themselves, "We are not trapped forever. We can change." The words are quiet, but they are unshakable. And once spoken, they join all the other promises made in the dark, promises that will carry them through every storm still to come. The weeks after that Sunday unfold like a quiet storm, invisible to anyone outside but undeniable inside the walls of the house. Outwardly, everything seems the same. The father still rises early, sits with his paper, and wears his silence like armor. The mother still fills her days with movement, her hands never still, her voice humming songs that end before they truly begin. The eldest still takes on too much, carrying responsibility that does not belong only to them. The youngest still plays, still giggles, still asks innocent questions, and the middle child still watches, still wonders, still pushes. But beneath the surface, nothing is the same. The silence has been cracked too many times, and everyone knows it. At school, the child finds themselves speaking louder than ever. They argue their points in class, they defend classmates from unfairness, they join discussions with a confidence that shocks even them. Teachers notice, some praising, some cautioning. Friends notice, some inspired, some envious. The child feels alive in those moments, their voice ringing out without fear of punishment. They begin to realize that their words carry power not only for themselves, but for others too. And yet, every time they return home, the weight of silence presses down again, heavier, because they now know what freedom feels like. The contrast is sharper, the suffocation stronger. One night, the father returns home late, his silence heavier than usual. The mother sets food before him, the eldest clears dishes, the youngest plays nearby. The middle child watches him closely. His shoulders sag, his face looks older, his hands tremble slightly as he lifts his spoon. In that moment, the child realizes something they had never considered before. Perhaps the silence that has ruled their lives is not just a weapon he uses against them, but a shield he uses against himself. Maybe he too is trapped. Maybe his silence is the only way he knows to survive. The thought does not excuse the pain he causes, but it changes how the child sees him. For the first time, anger mixes with pity. Later that night, the child whispers to their notebook, he is afraid too. They write pages about fear disguised as control, about silence hiding sorrow, about how strength can sometimes be nothing more than endurance. The words spill out, raw and unpolished, but honest. And in writing them, the child feels both closer to understanding and further from giving in. Because if silence is nothing but fear, then breaking it is not just rebellion, it is survival. The eldest, however, does not see it this way. They corner the middle child one afternoon, their voice low but desperate. "You're going to ruin everything. He can't handle it. We can't handle it." The middle child replies, steady but soft, "It's already ruined. We're just pretending it's not." The eldest recoils, hurt by the words because they know, deep down, they are true. They walk away, shoulders heavy, silence thicker than ever. The youngest continues their innocent rebellion. They giggle louder, ask more questions, copy the middle child's defiance in ways that seem harmless but carry meaning. The parents scold, blaming the influence of the older sibling, but even their scolding lacks force now. Change spreads like fire, creeping into corners no one thought possible. Then comes another Sunday, the day when silence always tightens its grip. The table is set, the soup steaming, the bread sliced. The father begins as he always does, his words about duty and sacrifice falling heavy. But this time, the middle child interrupts with a story. They talk about school, about teamwork, about laughter. Their words are bright, their voice steady. The father glares, his silence sharp. But the child does not stop. They finish their story, then pick up their spoon calmly. The mother stares at them with wide eyes. The eldest hides a trembling smile. The youngest claps softly. The father says nothing. His silence is no longer victory. It is retreat. That night, the house feels lighter than usual. The mother hums a little longer. The eldest lingers with less weariness. The youngest plays more freely. The middle child lies awake, their heart pounding not with fear, but with something new, hope. They whisper again to themselves, "We can change. We will change." The next days carry new tensions. The father, sensing his authority slipping, grows harsher in small ways, scolding for unfinished chores, demanding stricter obedience, tightening rules where he can. But the power of these commands feels thinner, less absolute. The mother enforces them half-heartedly, the eldest follows them mechanically, the youngest obeys with playful defiance, and the middle child resists quietly, steadily. The rules are no longer unbreakable, they are just habits, and habits can be broken. One afternoon, while searching in the attic again, the middle child finds an old box filled with letters. They are faded, yellowed, written in their father's hand. Some are to friends, some to family, some never sent at all. Reading them, the child discovers a man they do not recognize, a younger version of their father who dreamed of travel, of music, of freedom. A man who laughed in words, who spoke of hope. They stare at the letters in disbelief. How did that man become the silent figure they know now? How did dreams turn into chains? The discovery fills them with questions they cannot ask, at least, not yet. But it also fills them with determination. If even their father once dreamed, then silence is not destiny. It is only a choice, one they refuse to make. At the next meal, the child studies him closely, imagining the young man who wrote those letters. They wonder if he remembers. They wonder if he regrets. They wonder if, somewhere deep inside, that man still lives. And though they say nothing aloud, their gaze itself is a challenge. Because now, when they look at him, they no longer see a wall, they see a crack. The eldest notices the change too. One night, they whisper again, but this time, their tone is softer. "Maybe you're right, maybe things can be different." The words are hesitant, uncertain, but they are the beginning of something. The middle child smiles faintly, not in triumph, but in relief. For the first time, they are not entirely alone. The mother, though still cautious, begins to soften as well. She lets her children's laughter linger. She listens to their stories more fully. She even tells fragments of her own past, not the whole truth, but enough to hint at the dreams she once carried. Each small gesture feels like a blessing, a silent encouragement to keep going. The father remains the hardest. His silence is still heavy, his command still sharp, his authority still looming. But even he cannot stop the change entirely. He sees the way his children's eyes no longer lower so quickly, the way their voices no longer falter so easily, the way his wife's silence is no longer absolute. And though he fights it, deep down he knows the silence is slipping away. That night, lying in bed, the middle child writes one final line in their notebook before drifting to sleep. The silence is not forever. And for the first time, they believe it completely. The days move forward with a strange mixture of tension and possibility, as if the house itself is holding its breath, waiting to see which way the wind will turn. The father still commands through silence, but his silence is no longer absolute. It is cracked, brittle, weighed down by the knowledge that voices have risen against it and will rise again. The mother still moves through her endless cycle of chores, her hands steady, her body practiced, but now her eyes carry a flicker of something different, a hint of hope, a fragile permission she gives her children in the quietest ways. The eldest still bears responsibility like a shield, protecting the fragile balance, but their resolve has thinned, worn away by the realization that maybe peace built on silence is not peace at all. The youngest, unburdened by fear, runs freer, their laughter no longer completely smothered, their questions louder, more insistent, and the middle child, the one who has dared again and again to break the silence, carries both the weight of resistance and the thrill of freedom. They are afraid, yes, but beneath the fear burns something stronger: determination. At school, the contrast grows sharper. Teachers see confidence blossoming. Classmates gather to listen when they speak. Some call them bold, others reckless, but the child begins to notice how words ripple outward, touching people, stirring change. For the first time, they realize their voice is not only for themselves. It carries meaning beyond their own survival. And this realization feeds their courage, making it harder and harder to slip back into the smallness their father demands at home. One evening, while cleaning the kitchen, the mother pauses. Her hands rest on the edge of the sink, her gaze fixed on nothing. The middle child notices and asks softly, "What are you thinking about?" She startles, then shakes her head quickly. Nothing. But the child has learned to hear the truth behind silence. "You don't have to hide it from me," they whisper. For a moment, the mother's face softens, almost as if she will finally speak the words she has carried for years. But then, the sound of the father's footsteps fills the hallway, and she returns to washing dishes, humming too loudly, her voice trembling. Still, the child has seen it, the desire, the ache, the possibility. The father grows more restless. He senses control slipping in ways he cannot name. He notices the mother's hesitation, the eldest's fatigue, the youngest's boldness, the middle child's defiance. His silences stretch longer, his commands sharper. But the more he tries to impose order, the more fragile it feels. At the table, his words fall flat. In the living room, his silence no longer commands fear. Even his glares, once enough to end any rebellion, now meet eyes that refuse to look away. He is still the figure of authority, but he is no longer unchallenged. The eldest, long the peacemaker, begins to crack. One night, after yet another argument between father and middle child, they break down in tears. "I can't do this anymore," they confess, their voice trembling. "I can't keep holding everything together." The middle child hugs them, whispering, "You don't have to. It was never only yours to carry." The words are gentle, but they shift something deep inside. For the first time, the eldest allows themselves to lay down the burden, even just for a moment. The youngest, emboldened by the changes swirling around them, becomes even louder in their innocence. They laugh at the table, they sing in hallways, they ask endless questions without fear. The father scolds, but the scolding lacks force. The mother half smiles when no one sees. The eldest sighs, but more softly now, and the middle child feels pride, because they know their rebellion has spread. The silence is not only broken by them, it is breaking through all of them. One night, while exploring the attic again, the middle child finds something they never expected: an old notebook belonging to their father. Its pages are filled with neat handwriting, stories, poems, fragments of dreams. The words reveal a younger man full of longing and hope, a man who once wanted more than silence, more than survival. Reading those pages, the child feels both shock and sorrow. How did that man disappear? How did those dreams turn into chains? They tuck the notebook away, but its words burn in their mind. If even their father once dreamed, then silence is not destiny, it is only surrender. The next Sunday meal arrives, heavy as always. The soup steams, the bread is cut, the ritual begins. But when the father speaks of sacrifice, the middle child interrupts again, this time not with defiance but with gentleness. "I read once that you used to write poems," they say softly. The table stills. The father's head jerks up, his eyes narrowing. "Where did you hear that?" His voice is sharp, dangerous. The mother gasps. The eldest grips the edge of the table. The youngest stares. The child holds his gaze and answers, "I found them. They were beautiful." Silence crashes down heavier than ever. The father trembles, his hands clenching, his face pale. For a long, unbearable moment, no one breathes. Then, with a growl, he stands abruptly and leaves the table. The door slams, dishes rattle, the house shakes. But the truth has been spoken, and once spoken, it cannot be erased. The mother whispers, "You shouldn't have," but her voice breaks. The eldest shakes their head, torn between fear and relief. The youngest whispers, "Did Dad really write poems?" Their eyes shine with wonder. The middle child nods, "Yes." And for the first time, the father is not only a figure of power, he is a man, once young, once dreaming, once different. That night, the middle child writes furiously in their own notebook. They write about the poems, about the silence, about the father who hides behind walls of stone but once held words like treasures. They write about the mother who still hums broken songs, about siblings, each carrying their own burden. They write about themselves, about how truth hurts but also heals, about how rebellion is not destruction but creation. And as they write, they realize something profound. Their fight is not against their father, not even against the silence itself. It is for love, for honesty, for the freedom to be whole. The days that follow are tense. The father avoids eye contact, his silence harsher, his presence heavier. But beneath it all, something has cracked inside him too. He cannot erase the words, cannot erase the memory of the poems. And though he fights harder than ever, everyone can see it, the silence is no longer whole. The mother, in her quiet way, begins to encourage her children more openly. She smiles at their laughter, listens to their stories, even tells fragments of her own past. The eldest, though still cautious, begins to loosen their grip on duty, finding small moments of joy. The youngest grows louder still, fearless in their innocence. And the middle child continues, steady, unshaken, carrying the fire inside them. One night, lying awake, the child whispers to themselves, "We are changing, slowly, painfully, but we are changing." And the words, though quiet, feel like prophecy. The days move forward, but they do not move the same. Something in the air has shifted permanently, like a curtain pulled back that no one can close again. The father's silence remains, but it no longer commands the same unquestioned obedience. It is harsher now, brittle at the edges, weighed down by the exposure of what was once hidden. The mother continues her endless rhythm, cooking, cleaning, folding, but her movements feel less mechanical. Her eyes wander more often. Her sighs are heavier, her pauses longer, as though she is thinking about things she had buried too deep to touch before. The eldest, once so strict in maintaining peace, begins to loosen ever so slightly, no longer racing to patch every crack, no longer scolding every slip. The youngest is louder now, braver, their laughter bubbling out in moments that once would have been stifled. And the middle child, who lit the fire in the first place, feels both the exhaustion of fighting and the thrill of knowing it has not been in vain. At school, the child continues to grow into themselves. They raise their hand without hesitation. They speak up when others falter. They carry themselves differently. Teachers notice, classmates notice, even strangers notice. Words have become their strength, their shield, their weapon. They learn how to weave them carefully, not just to defend, but to connect, not just to question, but to imagine. It is at school that they begin to believe their voice could shape more than just their own life, that it could shape others too. And each time they return home, the weight of silence feels more suffocating, but also more fragile. Because now, they know, silence can be broken. The eldest watches them with a mixture of awe and fear. One night, sitting together when the house is quiet, they confess, "I don't know how you keep going. I don't know how you stand up to him." The middle child answers softly, "Because I can't imagine not standing up anymore." The eldest nods, their shoulders heavy. "I wish I could be like you." For the first time, the middle child reaches for their hand and says, "You already are. You just don't see it yet." The eldest's eyes widen, then soften, as if a burden has been lifted just slightly. The mother begins to show more cracks in her silence too. She listens longer when the children speak, sometimes even smiling faintly when they laugh. Once, when the father scolds too harshly, she places a hand on his arm and says quietly, "Enough." It is a small word, barely audible, but everyone hears it. The father freezes, stunned. The children stare. The silence that follows is not the same as before. It carries a new weight, the mother's voice. The youngest, fearless in their innocence, keeps testing boundaries. They sing at the table, they drop spoons deliberately, they ask questions with wide, unblinking eyes. The father's glares no longer silence them immediately. Sometimes they even giggle in response, as if daring him to break. And though the parents scold, the laughter spreads. The eldest hides a smile, the mother hides a tear, and the middle child beams quietly, proud of the small revolutions that ripple through their youngest sibling. One evening, as the family sits together in uneasy quiet, the middle child dares once more. "Dad," they begin carefully, "what did you want when you were my age?" The father's eyes darken, his hands grip the table, his silence thickens. The mother shifts nervously, the eldest holds their breath, the youngest leans forward eagerly. Finally, after a long pause, the father mutters, "It doesn't matter what I wanted. Life isn't about what you want." The words are sharp, final, but they are also a confession. He wanted something once, and now it no longer matters, at least to him. The child hears more in what he does not say than in what he does, and it hardens their resolve all over again. That night, in the attic, the middle child pulls out the old letters and notebooks again. They read the words of a younger father, a man who once dreamed, a man who once wrote. They trace the handwriting with their fingers, imagining the boy he used to be. And they realize something painful. Their rebellion is not against him, it is for him too. It is to reclaim what he lost, to prove that silence does not have to be the end of the story. The mother finds them there, notebook in hand. She does not scold. Instead, she sits beside them, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "He was different once," she whispers. "We both were." For the first time, she lets herself be vulnerable, lets herself share a piece of her hidden truth. The child leans against her, and for a brief moment, the weight of silence lifts. But silence does not surrender easily. The father grows harsher again, his commands more rigid, his silences longer. At the next Sunday meal, he demands complete quiet, his eyes scanning the table like a warning. For a while, no one speaks. The soup steams, the bread cools, the air thickens. Then the youngest, with innocence and courage intertwined, blurts out, "Why can't we ever just laugh together?" The father slams his hand on the table, the sound cracking through the room. The youngest jumps, the eldest gasps, the mother freezes. But before silence can fall again, the middle child speaks, their voice steady. "Because you won't let us. But we're going to laugh anyway." The words are simple, but they hit like a storm. The father's face burns red, his silence heavier than ever. But this time, the weight does not crush. It cracks. The mother's eyes brim with tears. The eldest stares in shock. The youngest bursts into nervous giggles. And though no one says it out loud, everyone knows something irreversible has happened. That night, the father retreats into his silence. The mother hums softly. The eldest sighs with relief. The youngest drifts to sleep with a smile. And the middle child lies awake, heart pounding but steady. They know the road ahead is long, full of battles and storms, but they also know the truth now. Silence cannot hold forever. Voices, once released, will always find their way back. The house feels different now, though no one says it out loud. Silence still lingers, yes, but it is no longer the kind of silence that rules unchallenged. It is the kind that arrives after storms, heavy with tension, but unable to erase what has already been spoken. The father still sits at the table, his paper in hand, his eyes sharp, his silence deliberate. But it no longer carries the same weight. The mother still moves through her endless tasks, her hands busy, her voice humming, but her humming feels steadier now, more like a choice than a mask. The eldest still shoulders burdens, but they no longer rush to fill every gap. Sometimes they let things be, sometimes they allow themselves a smile, sometimes they allow the cracks to show. The youngest, bold and unashamed, giggles louder, asks questions more freely, plays without fear. And the middle child, whose voice first cracked the silence, feels the change in their bones. They are not finished, not free, not safe from storms, but they are no longer powerless. At school, their voice carries further still. They are not just answering questions now, but leading discussions, rallying classmates, daring to challenge ideas. Teachers notice. Some warn them to slow down, to be careful. Others quietly encourage, whispering, "Keep speaking, don't lose that." Friends admire, tease, question, but all are drawn to the fire they carry. The child feels it too. Words have become more than survival. They are possibility. They are the future. At home, that future feels distant, but not impossible. One evening, as the family sits together, the youngest tells a silly story from play. The eldest chuckles softly, the mother smiles faintly, and for a fleeting moment, the father almost allows his lips to twitch upward. It is not laughter, not yet, but it is something. The middle child notices and writes it down later in their notebook. Even he remembers. Because that is what it felt like, a memory, a flicker of something buried but not dead. The eldest begins to change too. One night, while the house sleeps, they whisper to the middle child, "I think you're right. I think we can't live in silence forever." The words are quiet, hesitant, but they are a step, a confession. The middle child nods, their heart warm. They no longer feel alone. The mother, slowly, reveals more of herself. While folding laundry, she tells fragments of stories from her youth, how she loved music, how she once sang, how she once dreamed of traveling. Her voice trembles, but her eyes shine with a light the child has never seen before. "Dreams don't last," she says softly, almost apologetically, but the child shakes their head. "They can, if we don't bury them." The mother does not answer, but she smiles faintly, and that smile feels like permission. The father, of course, resists most. His silence sharpens, his commands grow stricter. He senses the shift in his family and tries to hold on tighter. At the next Sunday meal, he demands order, demands obedience, demands silence. But the silence that follows is not submission, it is defiance. The children exchange glances, the mother's eyes glisten, the eldest lowers their head but does not scold, the youngest giggles under their breath. And the middle child, steady and unafraid, speaks again. "We hear you, but we will not be quiet forever." The father's hand slams the table, rattling dishes, shaking the room. But this time, the sound does not silence them, it only echoes. The mother whispers, "Enough." The eldest whispers, "Please." The youngest whispers, "Why?" And the middle child simply holds his gaze. For the first time, he looks away first. That night, the child writes in their notebook with trembling hands. He looked away. For the first time, he looked away. They write page after page, words pouring out faster than they can catch them. They write about fear, about courage, about love twisted and heavy, about dreams buried and found again. They write about their siblings, about their mother, even about their father. They write about silence and how silence, once cracked, can never fully heal. The days that follow carry a new energy. The mother hums more often, sometimes even singing softly when she thinks no one hears. The eldest sighs less, laughs more. The youngest bursts into song at random, daring their father to scold. And the middle child keeps speaking, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in bold declarations, always steady. The father fights it, yes, but even he cannot stop the change. His silence is no longer command. It is retreat. One evening, while sitting together, the father surprises them all. He clears his throat, his voice low, rough, but real. "What do you want to do with your life?" he asks the middle child. The question is sharp, almost mocking, but it is a question nonetheless. The child answers without hesitation, "I want to live where silence doesn't decide everything." The words hang in the air, bold and dangerous. The father's eyes harden, his silence thickens, but he does not scold. He does not slam the table. He simply sits, staring, as if unsure whether to be furious or impressed. The mother hides a smile. The eldest stares. The youngest claps their hands. And though no one says it, everyone knows. Something has shifted again. That night, the middle child writes, he asked me. The words fill pages, their hands shaking with excitement. It was not acceptance, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is the beginning. The silence is not gone. It may never be gone completely, but it is no longer unchallenged, no longer absolute, no longer the master of the house. And the child knows now, beyond doubt, that the future will not be ruled by silence. The days that follow the father's unexpected question linger in the family like a strange echo. He had spoken, not to command, not to silence, but to ask. And even though his tone was sharp and defensive, even though his silence afterward was heavy, the fact that he asked at all changed something. The mother moves through her chores with a lighter step, humming longer melodies that do not break as quickly. The eldest looks at the middle child differently now, no longer with only fear but with a flicker of admiration they try to hide. The youngest bursts into laughter more often, emboldened by the cracks in the old order. And the middle child, the one who dared to speak, feels a new certainty burning inside them. The silence is no longer the only language in this house. At school, their confidence has grown roots. They stand tall in class, answer questions with conviction, join debates without hesitation. Teachers nod, some impressed, some concerned, whispering warnings about being too outspoken. But the child does not care. They have learned that words are power, and each time they speak, they prove to themselves that their voice will never again be lost to silence. Friends begin to gather around them, not just because of their boldness, but because their words resonate. They discover that they can give others courage too, and this realization fills them with both pride and responsibility. At home, the changes are subtle but undeniable. One evening, as the family eats together, the youngest suddenly asks, "Dad, did you really write poems?" The air freezes. The father's eyes flash. The mother stiffens. The eldest holds their breath. But before anger can flare, the middle child answers calmly, "Yes, he did. And they were beautiful." The father glares, his silence sharp, but he does not deny it. He says nothing. The meal continues, but something important has happened. The youngest has asked. The truth has been spoken. The silence has not swallowed it. Later that night, the mother approaches the middle child quietly. "You should be careful," she warns, her voice trembling. But then she adds, barely audible, "Thank you." Her eyes glisten, her lips tremble, and the child understands. She cannot fight openly, but she sees, she believes, she hopes. The eldest, too, begins to soften. They still beg for caution, but less desperately now. One evening they admit, "When you speak, I feel braver, even if I can't say it myself." The middle child squeezes their hand. "One day, you will." And they believe it. The father grows more restless. His silences are harsher, his commands sharper, but he cannot erase what has been revealed. He cannot erase the laughter of his youngest, the whispers of his eldest, the quiet rebellion of his wife, the steady fire of his middle child. The more he tries to hold on, the more obvious it becomes that control is slipping. One Sunday, the ritual repeats as always. Soup, bread, silence. But the air is different. The children exchange glances, the mother hums softly, the father scowls. When he begins his usual talk of duty, the middle child interrupts again, their voice steady. Duty matters, but so does happiness, so does love. The father slams his spoon down, his face red with fury. The eldest flinches, the mother gasps, the youngest laughs nervously. But this time, the middle child does not stop. "We are not machines, we are a family, and families should be more than silence." The father trembles, his fists clenching. For a moment, it seems he will erupt, but instead, he stands and leaves the table, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The door slams, the house shakes, the silence that follows is deafening, yet it is not the same as before. It is not his silence ruling the house. It is the family's silence, filled with fear, with hope, with possibility. The mother begins to cry, quietly, her shoulders shaking. The eldest stares at the table, torn between guilt and relief. The youngest whispers, "We're okay, right?" The middle child nods, though their own heart pounds. "We're okay." That night, the father does not return to the table. He stays in his room, the door shut tight. The mother tucks the youngest into bed with shaking hands. The eldest lingers in the hallway. The middle child writes in their notebook. "He left," they write. "He walked away." And the world did not end. They fill pages with words, their hand aching, their mind racing. They write about fear, about courage, about love, about freedom. They write about how silence, once broken, can never rule the same way again. The following days are tense. The father avoids them, his presence heavy but distant. The mother hums more often, her voice stronger. The eldest shoulders less, letting themselves rest. The youngest laughs freely, daring more boldly. And the middle child keeps speaking, steady, unshaken. The house is still fragile, still heavy, still scarred, but it is alive in a new way. One evening, while sitting outside beneath the stars, the mother whispers, "Maybe one day we will laugh together, all of us." The eldest nods quietly, the youngest claps, the middle child smiles. The father is not there, not yet, but the possibility hangs in the air like a promise. The silence is not gone. It may never be gone completely, but it has lost its hold. It is no longer destiny. It is only a shadow. And in its place, voices rise, trembling at first, but growing stronger with every word, every laugh, every story shared. The middle child lies awake that night, staring at the ceiling, whispering the words that have carried them through. We are not trapped forever. We will find a way. And this time, the words do not feel like hope. They feel like truth. The silence in the house still exists, but it has changed shape. It is no longer the towering wall it once was, unbreakable, unquestioned. Now, it feels like a shadow that clings to the edges of rooms, heavy but unable to command the way it used to. Once, silence in this home was a master, demanding obedience, shaping every gesture, pressing down on every breath. But now, it is simply a habit, stubborn, lingering, unable to vanish completely, but unable to rule with the same strength. The father still wears silence like armor, sitting stiffly in his chair, newspaper folded in his hands, his eyes dark and unreadable. Yet when he looks up now, there is a flicker of uncertainty, a hesitation in the way his gaze lingers. The mother still moves through the house with her familiar rhythm, the clatter of dishes, the sound of sweeping, the rustle of folded laundry. But her humming is different now. It is not just filler noise to hide the weight of quiet. It is softer, but steadier, carrying warmth that has been missing for years. The eldest still carries their role as peacemaker, shoulders bent with responsibility, eyes tired. But even they have begun to loosen their grip. They no longer rush to cover every silence, no longer try to smooth over every sharp edge. Sometimes they even smile without guilt. Sometimes they let the world be messy. The youngest has become fearless in innocence, their laughter bubbling up in the most unexpected moments, their questions spilling out like streams of light through cracks. And the middle child, the one who dared to break the silence first, walks differently now. Their steps are firmer, their eyes brighter, their heart heavier but also steadier. They know storms still lie ahead. They know silence is not gone. But they also know silence is no longer destiny. At school, they shine. It is as if the voice that once trembled at the dinner table has found full strength in the classroom. When teachers ask questions, they do not hesitate. When classmates falter, they speak up. Their words are not always perfect, not always clever, but they are always theirs, and that matters more than anything. Some teachers warn them not to be too outspoken, but others nod with encouragement, quietly telling them to keep going. Friends gather around, drawn to their fire, some teasing, some admiring, some simply watching. For the first time, the child realizes that their voice is not only for survival. It can inspire. It can lead. It can change the world around them. They begin to carry this realization home, tucking it into their heart like a secret weapon. The father notices the change, of course. He notices everything. His silences grow sharper in response, his commands more rigid. He demands respect, demands obedience, demands that the world inside the house return to what it once was. But even he cannot ignore the shift. He cannot unhear the laughter of his youngest, the sighs of relief from his eldest, the humming of his wife, the unwavering voice of his middle child. He tries, yes, but his silence is no longer a command. It is a retreat. One evening, as they sit at the table, the father does something unexpected. He speaks. His voice is low, rough, uncertain. "What do you want to be?" he asks the middle child. The room stills. The mother freezes, spoon in midair. The eldest looks up in shock. The youngest gasps and grins. The middle child's heart pounds, but their voice is calm. "I want to be someone who speaks. I want to live in a place where silence doesn't decide everything." The father stares at them for a long time, his silence heavy but different. He does not scold. He does not slam the table. He simply sits there, holding the words in his silence like stones in his hands. For the first time, his silence feels less like rejection and more like acknowledgement. That night, the child writes page after page in their notebook. Their hand aches, their eyes blur, but they cannot stop. "He asked me," they write. "He heard me. He did not erase me." The words spill out like water breaking through a dam. They write about their siblings, the eldest who has carried too much, the youngest who laughs without fear. They write about their mother, her songs cut short, her dreams buried, her eyes filled with both sorrow and love. They write about their father, the man who hides behind silence, who once wrote poems, who once dreamed, who has been broken by life, but not destroyed completely. They write about themselves, about courage, about fear, about the truth that can no longer be denied. Silence is not forever. In the days that follow, the family begins to move differently. The mother tells more stories from her past, bits and pieces of the life she once imagined. She talks about music, about traveling, about laughter she once shared. Her voice trembles but grows steadier each time. The children listen hungrily, piecing together the image of a woman they never knew. The eldest leans into these stories, their eyes shining with something between longing and relief. The youngest soaks them up like sunlight, imagining futures wider than the walls around them. And the middle child listens with tears in their eyes, because these stories prove what they have always believed. Silence can bury dreams, but it cannot kill them. The father resists, of course. His silence sharpens, his commands bite. He tries to restore the old order, to drag them back into the darkness. But even he cannot erase what has begun. At the next Sunday meal, he demands silence, demands obedience, demands the family return to ritual. For a while, everyone sits quietly. The soup steams, the bread cools, the air grows heavy. Then the youngest giggles, unable to hold it in. The eldest hides a smile, the mother hums softly. The middle child lifts their head and says clearly, "We hear you, but we will not be quiet forever." The father's hand slams down on the table, rattling dishes, shaking the room. But this time, no one flinches. The mother whispers, "Enough." The eldest whispers, "Please." The youngest whispers, "Why?" And the middle child holds his gaze, steady, unafraid. For the first time, he looks away first. And in that moment, the silence breaks again. That night, the father retreats into his room. The mother lingers in the kitchen. The eldest sighs in relief. The youngest hums themselves to sleep. The middle child writes in their notebook until the pages blur. He looked away. They write, he looked away. It is victory, small and fragile, but real, and it is enough to carry them forward. The final Sunday of this story arrives. The table is set as always, the soup steaming, the bread sliced. The family gathers, the silence waiting. But this time, something is different. The mother hums softly as she places the bowls. The eldest sits with shoulders less heavy. The youngest swings their legs, grinning, ready to speak. And the middle child sits tall, calm, steady. The father begins his ritual words of duty and sacrifice, but before he can finish, the youngest bursts out laughing at something small, something silly. The eldest chuckles too. The mother smiles faintly. The middle child speaks, telling a story from school, their voice sure, their presence unshaken. The father glares, his silence sharp, but he does not stop them. He does not slam the table. He does not shout. He simply sits, his silence holding but not controlling. When the meal ends, he leaves quietly. And in his absence, the family breathes freely. The mother hums louder. The eldest laughs openly. The youngest sings. And the middle child sits there, notebook waiting upstairs, heart full, knowing the truth. The silence has lost. That night, they write their final words in this chapter of their life. We are not trapped forever. We have already begun to break free. They close the notebook, place it under their pillow, and lie down. The house is still heavy, still scarred, still imperfect. The father is still himself, still silent, still broken. The mother is still weary, still carrying too much. The eldest is still burdened, the youngest still innocent. But the silence no longer owns them, and that is enough. The child whispers to themselves before sleep takes them, "Silence cannot last forever. Words will always return. Laughter will always survive. Love will always rise. And with that vow, they drift into dreams not of fear, but of futures. Futures where they are free. Futures where their voice is never silenced again. The story ends not with a perfect family, not with every wound healed, not with every dream realized. It ends with something more real, more powerful. It ends with possibility. It ends with a crack wide enough for hope to pour through. It ends with a promise that silence, no matter how strong, can never last forever when even one voice dares to rise against it. And that promise, small as it may seem, is everything. The family begins to breathe differently in his absence. The mother hums again, softly. The eldest smiles faintly, though they try to hide it. The youngest laughs more freely, and the middle child feels something unfamiliar, the beginning of freedom. They know it will not be easy. They know storms are still coming, but they also know something essential. Silence has lost. It may still linger, it may still fight, but its hold is broken. And once a hold is broken, no matter how strong it once seemed, it can never be the same again. The days that follow the father's storming out feel like walking on ground that might split open at any moment. The house still stands, the routines still play out, but everyone knows something is different. The silence he carries back into the house after that night is not the silence of control anymore. It is the silence of distance. He eats at the table without speaking, leaves early, returns late. His presence is still heavy, but it no longer fills every corner. Instead, it feels like a shadow present, looming, but thinner than before. The mother senses it first. She watches him with wary eyes, noticing the way his hands tremble when he thinks no one sees, the way he avoids her gaze, the way his silence is no longer unbreakable but cracked by exhaustion. She works as she always does, but sometimes she pauses, staring out the window as though searching for something far away. The eldest, though relieved by the father's distance, grows more burdened. They shoulder more chores, keep younger siblings occupied, try to patch holes in a family that feels like it is unraveling thread by thread. The youngest, sensing the shift but not understanding it, grows louder in play, as though filling the house with noise can keep it from collapsing. And the middle child, at the center of it all, feels both fear and freedom mixing like fire and water inside them. They know their words changed everything, and they also know nothing can go back to how it was before. At school, the difference shows too. Teachers notice their boldness. Classmates rally around them, some calling them strong, others reckless. One teacher pulls them aside and says, "You have a fire in you. Use it wisely." The words echo long after, shaping how the child sees themselves. A fire is dangerous, yes, but also warm, also necessary. Maybe their voice is not a curse, but a gift. At home, they begin to speak more openly to their siblings. Late at night, when the house is quiet, they whisper to the eldest, "You don't have to carry everything. It's not your job to keep the peace alone." The eldest shakes their head, insisting it is the only way, but the words plant seeds of doubt. To the youngest, they whisper stories of futures where rules are kinder, where questions are welcome, where laughter is safe. The youngest listens wide-eyed, their imagination catching fire. To the mother they say little, but sometimes their eyes meet, and in that glance is understanding, a promise to carry what she could not. Then comes another Sunday, the day that always brings the heaviest rituals. The soup is made, the bread sliced, the table set, but the ritual feels thinner, weaker, as if it no longer holds the same power. When the father insists on silence during the meal, the youngest giggles loudly, dropping a spoon with a clatter. The father glares, but before he can speak, the middle child says calmly, "It's just a spoon." The words are simple, but they strike like lightning. For once, the father says nothing. He resumes eating, his silence brittle, and in that moment, everyone feels the shift. The old order is crumbling, piece by piece. That night, the middle child writes furiously in their notebook. They write about the table, about spoons and silence, about how power can slip away not with a scream but with a laugh. They write about their father, not as a monster but as a man trapped in his own silence. They write about their mother, still humming in stolen moments, carrying unspoken hope. They write about their siblings, each caught in the same storm but in different ways. And most of all, they write about themselves not as a victim but as a voice that will not vanish. The mother finds them writing and says nothing this time. She only touches their shoulder gently before walking away. That small touch is enough to say everything she cannot. One evening, when the father returns home, he finds the children laughing together in the yard. For a long time, he stands in the doorway, watching, his face unreadable. Then, instead of shouting, instead of demanding silence, he turns away and walks inside. The middle child notices. They realize the fight is not won through arguments alone, but through persistence, through living differently, until even silence cannot hold it back. The eldest begins to change too. They still worry, still try to mediate, but one evening they sit beside the middle child and whisper, "Maybe you're right. Maybe things can be different. It is not a full surrender, but it is the first step, and it feels like the beginning of a new alliance." The youngest, emboldened, starts asking more questions openly, their innocence shielding them from the harshest responses. And the mother, slowly, tentatively, starts to smile again. Not often, but enough to remind everyone that joy is still possible. The father, however, struggles most. He feels the shift, feels control slipping like sand through his fingers. He tries to hold on, but every effort only reveals more cracks. He begins spending longer hours away, returning later, avoiding the table. His silence is still present, but it no longer rules. The family is learning to breathe without it. One night, the middle child gathers their courage and speaks directly to him. "Dad," they say quietly, "I don't want to fight you. I just want us to listen to each other." The father stares at them, his face hard, his silence suffocating. But for the first time, he does not dismiss the words outright. He looks away, mutters something under his breath too quiet to catch, but enough to show that maybe, just maybe, the wall is beginning to crumble. The days stretch on, each one carrying both tension and hope. The family is not healed, not yet, but something has shifted permanently. The silence that once defined them is no longer unbreakable. Voices have entered, laughter has slipped through, truth has been spoken. And once truth is spoken, it cannot be buried again. The middle child knows there are still battles ahead, still storms to weather, still nights of fear and mornings of guilt. But they also know something even stronger. The silence has lost its power, and in that knowledge, there is freedom. Lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling, they whisper to themselves, "We are not trapped forever. We will find a way." The words are small, but they carry the weight of everything that has come before. They are not just a hope, but a promise. And this time, the promise feels real. The house is not the same anymore, though its walls still stand, its roof still shelters, its routines still unfold each day. Something invisible has shifted, something that cannot be undone. Silence still exists, but it no longer holds the same power. It lingers like a ghost instead of a master, a habit instead of a law. The father still sits at the table, still folds his newspaper, still lets his silence speak for him. Yet his silence is different now, weaker, uncertain. The mother still moves through her work, still hums in half-remembered tunes, but her voice is steadier, her eyes more alive. The eldest still carries weight, but sometimes, in moments stolen away from duty, they let themselves laugh without fear. The youngest still plays, still asks questions, still mimics rebellion in small, innocent ways. And the middle child, the one who dared to break silence, walks with a new kind of strength in their step. They are not finished, not free, not unscarred, but they are no longer afraid. One morning, sunlight streams into the kitchen, brighter than usual. The middle child sits with their notebook, scribbling, lost in thought. The mother pours tea, the eldest arranges books, the youngest hums a silly song. The father enters, pauses at the doorway, and for the first time in a long time, he does not command silence. He simply sits. The child glances at him, their pen hovering over the page, waiting for the storm that does not come. Instead, the father clears his throat, the sound rough, uncertain. "What are you writing?" he asks. The room stills. The mother freezes mid-step. The eldest looks up sharply. The youngest stops humming. The child's heart races, but they answer softly, "Dreams." The father says nothing for a long time. His eyes drop to the table, his hands rest on the wood. Then, almost inaudibly, he mutters, "Keep them small." It is not permission, not encouragement, but neither is it a denial. It is the closest he has ever come to admitting that dreams exist at all. The mother exhales quietly. The eldest bows their head, the youngest grins. The child nods, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. They will not keep their dreams small, but they will keep them alive. As days turn to weeks, the cracks in the silence widen. The mother starts telling small stories from her past, not the full truth, not the whole story, but fragments. She speaks of laughter she once had, places she once saw, moments that remind her of who she used to be. The children listen hungrily, piecing together a life that was buried beneath duty. The eldest begins to open too, sharing worries they always carried alone, finally admitting that they are tired. The youngest, fearless in innocence, blurts out wishes at the table. "I want us to laugh more. I want us to eat something different on Sundays. I want us to be happy." The words would have been dangerous once, but now they hang in the air like fragile glass no one dares to break. And slowly, slowly, the father begins to shift. He does not laugh, not yet. He does not tell stories, not yet. But he listens longer. He stares softer. And though his silence remains, it no longer smothers. The middle child continues to write. Their notebook grows thicker, filled with words, drawings, dreams. They write about freedom, about joy, about homes built on love instead of fear. They write about their siblings, their mother, even their father. They write not only what is, but what could be. And with each page, the vision becomes clearer. They may still live within the old house, but inside themselves they are building something new. One evening, when the air outside is soft and the stars shimmer above, the family sits together on the porch. The youngest chatters, the eldest leans back with tired relief, the mother closes her eyes to the night breeze. The father sits silent, but this time his silence feels less like a wall and more like a pause, as though he too is listening to the night. The middle child looks at them all and feels something swell inside. It is not perfect. It may never be perfect. But there is love here, tangled and scarred, stubborn and real. And love, even when flawed, is worth saving. The child knows their journey is only beginning. There will be more arguments, more silences, more battles. The father may never fully change. The mother may always carry her buried sorrow. The eldest may always struggle with duty. The youngest may one day face the same questions. But something irreversible has happened. The silence has been cracked. The truth has been spoken. The possibility of freedom exists now, and it cannot be erased. Years later, they will remember this time, not only for the pain, but for the awakening. They will remember the first question asked at the table, the first defiant words, the first crack in the silence. They will remember the fear, but also the relief of finally being heard, even if only by themselves. They will remember how love survived, not in spite of rebellion, but because of it. And they will carry those memories into their own lives, into the families they build, into the voices they raise. For families are not meant to be prisons, they are meant to be roots and wings, grounding us with love, but also giving us strength to fly. And sometimes, to find that balance, someone has to break the silence first. Someone has to risk anger, risk distance, risk everything in order to make space for truth. In this family, it was the middle child. In another, it might be someone else. But the story is always the same. Silence cannot last forever. Love demands a voice. The story of this house ends not with dramatic escape, not with perfect resolution, but with something quieter, stronger. A spoon clattering on a Sunday, a mother's whispered blessing, a father's reluctant question, a child's steady promise. These small moments build into something larger, something unshakable. The knowledge that change is possible, even here, even now. And that knowledge is enough. Lying awake one last time, staring at the ceiling of the house that has both caged and protected them, the child whispers the words that carried them all this way. We are not trapped forever. We will find a way. The words drift into the night, not as a plea, but as a vow. And in that vow lives the future, messy, uncertain, but free.